Welcome back to the Expert Speaker Summit. We have our amazing guest, Ed Crow, to talk about how to pivot your HR strategy in times of uncertainty, who to hire, who to fire, and how to keep everybody happy. Welcome, Ed. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Well, all right, let's jump right into it, Ed. What is going on in the world of HR?
Probably the easier question is what isn't going on,
Right.
given current events, right? The biggest challenge that most HR people are faced with right now really varies based on the type of industry they're in, certainly, and where they're located. As you and I were chatting prior to going live here, I've got clients that are dealing with various levels of quarantine between different US states. So they may be able to operate in one state because they are considered essential or not in another state, and therefore they can't operate in another state. And so their challenge is they can't always just make a blanket decision that's going to cover the entire organization like they may have done in the past. And so when you use that term pivot, it's almost a swivel as well in trying to keep the dishes all up in the air at the same time.
That's a good term, Ed, the swivel, the HR swivel. Yeah, so we've got businesses that are dealing with all sorts of rules changing very, very quickly. So tell us how, first of all, HR strategy. You know, we don't always hear that word strategy, and I guess that's a plan into the future. And of course, everyone's strategies are changing. So maybe share with us, what is an HR strategy and how do you make one? And do we need to make a new HR strategy today?
So I definitely believe we need to have one. You know, if you look at just about any business function, finance puts out a budget every year, and that helps the financial strategy of an organization. And the IT function will put out a strategy for how they're going to bring in new technologies to help the business and so on. And HR is often the person who just reacts to what everyone else in the organization is doing. And I believe that HR needs to have its own strategy for how it is going to support the business. And so when I think about strategy, I think about things like, well, what's going on with the competition? And competition means two things to HR. One, it's the competition with the organization, right? People that are producing the same goods or services. But probably more importantly, when we think about competition, it's who are we competing for talent with? And that is probably different than who we may be competing with for production of goods and services. And so we have to know that. Where are we getting our talent from? Where are we losing our talent as well? I think about what's going on in the outside world and how we're reacting to it. And current events right now, they're the biggest test of whether or not we've got a great HR strategy. Are we in a situation where we can move on the dime and make changes and support our organization without skipping a beat? I mean, you know, all you have to do is read the headlines. There are a lot of companies still hiring out there and hiring in big, big ways. And so just as there are a number of organizations that have had to downsize due to current events, that has led to a boom in many other organizations. And so you've got HR in both those organizations. One is trying to figure out, how do I downsize and who do I downsize? And the other is they're scrambling for people to get in so they can keep up with demand for their products right now.
Okay, so if a company comes to you and says, Ed, the sky's falling, the world is changing, I know I need to downsize, what should I do? How do you walk them through that process?
I love talking about this, Majeed, because the temptation is for folks to say, well, we're going to just take the most recent hires, you know, so kind of that last in, first out and get rid of it. I don't. Now, if you're in a union represented environment, you may have to do that, obviously.
Right.
But the more sensible way is to really look at who your performers are. Don't let your top performers and your high potential people go out that door. Find a way, any way, to hold on to them. Flip side is those people that have been on performance improvement plans, they're not contributing, they're not growing. Those may be the ones that should be first on the list of furloughed employees. Yeah. Because they're not going to drive the value that the other folks are when you need high value out of a reduced workforce.
Right. So Ed, I know you only work with a few companies at a time,
Mhm.
and you've probably got a whole bunch of opportunities to serve these clients right now. Can you tell me about, based on your skill set and your
Mhm.
experience, what is the ideal client for you right now, and what is their problem that you can help them the most with right now?
Sure, sure. My ideal client is a mid-sized company around that 50 million mark who is struggling to keep up on really right now a weekly basis with how things are changing and the rules of the game are changing and perhaps the business owner or certainly the executive team are saying, gosh, maybe we have a great HR person, but they're so enmeshed in just keeping the finger in the dam, so to speak, that we can't get anything else done. And again, for companies that are exploding right now, based on the needs of the goods or services they're providing, they're still in a mode where they need the help. And so that's where I come in, is in helping them to not only manage perhaps this crisis, but in laying the foundation for them to leap forward when we come out of this. Because most of the experts are saying when we come out of this, the economies are going to bounce back. Now, there'll be argument over how quickly they'll bounce back, but
Yeah.
they will. And so you're probably not going to have a company who was doing really well before and is all of a sudden not going to do well. There's always going to be exceptions, to be sure. And so smart businesses, in spite of everything that's going on, are still saying, what do I need to do to make my business stronger tomorrow?
Hmm. And how far ahead do you think a smart business would plan right now based on the fact that everything's changing so quickly? Is this something that you would say, plan the next 30 days or 90 days, or how do you think about time in this context?
Yeah, I think the timeline has shortened up because the rules are just ever evolving right now. Typically, if you're talking about strategy, right, you're not looking at the next 30 days, you're looking much more long term. But right
Yeah.
now, when we're trying to fight fires and figure out in many cases, what fire do we need to leave burning right
Yeah.
now to address something more important? Yeah, I would say the next 30 days, a 30-day plan, a 60-day plan, a 90-day plan are absolutely critical to make sure that your business comes out of this in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of businesses aren't thinking about is how they're treating their people right now is going to determine what happens when the economy comes back. We were in a buyer's market economy, meaning that people could go demand a salary, they were getting hired, and we as business owners were kind of left with whoever we could get our hands on. That will likely come back in the near future. And when it does, if we've not taken care of our people properly during the times when we need them most right now, that's going to stick in their memory. And especially from what I've been reading, the younger generations, they're really the Z's and the millennials are the ones really looking at how's my place of business treating me right now. I'm not going to make a jump right now in the midst of this craziness. When things settle down, if I feel I've been disrespected, I'm out of here.
So what are some specific things that companies can do right now to show their people the support to create that feeling in their employees that, yeah, my company really took care of me?
Sure, sure. We're almost, for our listeners, if you go back to your high school psych classes and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I mean, we've gone well back down the pyramid.
Right.
And so you're seeing some companies offering employees pay raises. That's great. Put some extra money in their pockets for their extra effort. But I think more importantly right now, people want to feel safe. And so folks that are still going to work because they're essential employees, and maybe they're they're working at a supermarket or a bank or someplace where they're still interacting with the general public. These people are on edge and fearing for their personal health right now. And
Yeah.
so I think anything that we can do in the workplace to develop some space, that physical distancing between our general population and our employees is critical. I'm still, believe it or not, Majeed, I'm still hearing stories of organizations that are deemed essential asking their sales reps to go out and visit customers. It makes no sense to me.
Right.
Why you would ask your employee to do that when we've got tools like like Zoom or just picking up the phone for Pete's sake. And
Yeah.
so those are the types of things that employees are going to remember. I think they're also going to remember how their leader reacted in times. You're starting to see more and more CEOs of major corporations foregoing their salaries to make sure that their employees, maybe even those that are furloughed or whatever, they can continue to pay them. That is a tremendous sign of servant leadership.
Beautiful. So make your employees feel well taken care of. You will have that loyalty when you need it, and you'll shine through here. I want to point out that there is a checklist, a culture checklist. Can you tell us about that? We're sharing that with our audience here.
Yeah.
Tell us about this tool and how can we use it?
Yeah, so it's a nice simple walkthrough. Take you a couple of minutes to answer the questions, to get a sense for where is your culture right now. And I think it's critical to think about that, because the answer to that question is probably very different than it was 2 months ago, right?
True.
Where is it now, and why is it where it is? That's what the assessment's going to tell you. And those answers will give you an idea of, okay, maybe I've lost my focus a little bit on my employees because I'm trying to manage the craziness of current events. And I believe if you answer those questions thoughtfully and honestly, it'll guide you back to where you need to be in terms of maintaining the culture that you've worked so hard to build up. Now, the flip side is maybe you didn't have a very good culture prior to this.
Sure.
And you've circled the wagons and teamwork is at an all-time high. Then let's capitalize on that. Let's figure out how do we keep that going when things go back to whatever the new normal will be.
Beautiful. So the assessment will tell us where's our culture at right now and why is it there? And if it's got problems, we have now a better awareness of it. And if it's doing really well, we can see how we can maintain and replicate that moving forward.
Absolutely.
That assessment is available at edcrow.com/assessment. That's edkrow.com/assessment. Ed, if you have a story to share of a company or a leader that was experiencing their own cultural crisis, they brought in Ed Crow and they got their HR strategy done. And tell us about sort of what was the result or the effect of putting an HR strategy in place or pivoting the HR strategy in a time that they needed to make a change. They brought you in.
Right.
Yeah.
So I recently wrapped up a project with a pretty large medical practice. The CEO of it was at a session I was speaking in, and we were talking a lot about employment branding and how it's so important to have, just like you have your marketing brand, what is your brand for employment? And he came up to me after the session and said, hey, I think you and I got to talk. We've got some issues. And so we had our first call, and he said, Ed, I've got an $80 million practice. I've got 9 people in my HR function, and they don't do anything for me. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I think they're actively inhibiting my ability to grow this practice. They can't do the simple things like fill jobs. We've got 40 openings right now. I can't service our patients. And so here's a huge disconnect, right? So we agreed to work together. And I spent time with not just the HR team, because that's only part of the challenge, right? The other part of the challenge is I needed to talk with the rest of the executive team and some of the key service providers, some of the docs who were the owners of the practice, some of the nurses, the frontline staff, a whole bit, to get an idea of what was really going on. And the irony was there was a monster disconnect. So in talking with HR, there to a point, every single one of them, when I asked them, what's your role here? What's your ultimate job? They said, to make the employees happy. And I said, no, that is not your job. You cannot make another person happy. And so the irony is that when I talked with the doc owners and the management team, it was, HR is not doing squat for us right now. So I'm thinking, okay, HR, if that was your prime objective, you're failing, right? And so what we ended up working with the HR team to do was to just redefine each of their job roles and how it gets delivered out. Communication was a huge problem. HR thought they were good communicators. They weren't. Nobody paid any attention to anything HR put out. Why?
Yeah.
Because they would
Yeah.
put out a 5-page email. I saw them like, nobody's reading this. This is craziness.
Yeah.
To celebrate wellness days, they were having pizza and donuts. They were doing things that just intrinsically were almost opposite of what you would expect. And so not only did we reorganize the HR function in terms of job duties and who was doing what, but I also coached the HR director so that when she would go into the board meeting, she could be more productive in how she related the things that HR was doing for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, one example there that she gave me was, well, gee, Ed, I go to these meetings and I report on things and they don't care what I have to say. And I said, well, give me an example of some of the things you're reporting on. She says, well, I tell them about turnover. And I looked at her, I said, well, who cares about turnover?
Right.
Right. And she says, well, you should care. We're at 6% turnover and, we're losing good people. Okay, now you're on to something. Tell me who we're losing, who's going out the door, tell me what it's costing me. So we started to get into this mindset. I had to get her beyond the numbers and into the story, because that's what the owners need to hear. Tell me the story. Tell me I'm losing $50,000 a year on turnover. That I care about, not the percentage.
Interesting.
So it took about 9 months to go through the process. And if folks are on my website, actually one of the testimonials on my homepage is from that particular CEO saying, man, the guy came in and did what we need him to do. We've got an HR strategy that works. We've got a team that's firing on all cylinders. And about 6 months ago, they opened up a new campus across town from where they are. They're able to staff that campus. So, it's still a work in progress. Don't get me wrong, but they did a 180 from where they were.
Excellent. So in that story, it sounded like the HR department sort of had their focus in maybe the wrong spot.
Absolutely.
You kind of reassessed and said, okay, here's how you can be the most productive, most effective, most useful in your role. And then there's also some communication upgrades that you're offering where you say, instead of just giving numbers, let's help it really make sense for people.
Exactly.
So in the context of the global situation we're in now, we're all stepping back to reassess, okay, what are the new priorities? What are the new functions? And we all of our departments need to get more efficient in some ways, right? So that's really useful. If anyone's listening to this or watching this, and they have an organization in the $50 million mark or around there that has a HR department and wants a look at the strategy, Ed has kindly offered your calendar link to book a call.
Absolutely.
Which we've shared. And if you're on the screen somewhere, you'll see it. And if they can't see the link somewhere, what's the best way to schedule a call with you or contact you?
Sure. They can hit my website at edcrow.com, and right there on the home page is a button to schedule a free call. It will take 15, 20 minutes to have a chat and see if it makes sense to go further than that. So yeah, it's quite easy to get a hold of me.
Great. All right, Ed, is there one thing you'd like to leave the audience with, the leaders out there who are leading their HR team, thinking about who do I hire, who do I fire, how do I keep everybody happy, and how do I pivot my HR strategy? Is there any one thing you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, and I think that's expect more out of HR. If you're dissatisfied, or even if your HR function is just kind of going through the motions and you're a business executive or business owner, expect more out of them. Ask for more out of them. HR should be contributing to your business results. And if they're not, or they're actively inhibiting your results, that is a serious problem. And I would tell you that that's not what HR is designed to do. So if you're feeling like your HR function is not cutting it, then it's time that you and I have a chat.
Awesome. Ed Crow, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.